Thank you very much. Welcome today to the Resources and Engineering Skills Alliance webinar on the hiring intentions that are occurring in South Australia. A quick overview of what we'll cover today. We'll introduce RESA. We'll talk about the hiring intentions report for the last quarter, the South Australian advertisements, trends, the big picture of what's going on, including then analysis of regional and occupations, some subsector breakdowns of occupations and employment, and then industry activity, where the jobs are being generated around the country, around the state. Questions as we go, please submit them using the question box on your webinar panel, and we'll be able to get those, address those at the end. Thank you very much. My name is Phil DeCourcy and I'm the CEO of the Resources and Engineering Skills Alliance, and today we have the Workforce Development Manager here with us, Jodie Badcock. RESA is an industry governed not-for-profit organisation. We are focused on the mining industry, which includes oil and gas, renewable energy and the supply chain for the industry. And while we are covering these areas today and we reach out around the nation as far as those things are concerned, this presentation today is about the hiring intentions report for South Australia, so specifically addressing the South Australian context of hiring and jobs. So just a quick overview of RESA and what we do. We are supporters and developers of activities around South Australia, which include programs around labour market research. We undertake a number of aspects of research, including the number of people who are currently employed, the skills and occupations that they are employed in for the resources sector. Once we have that data, we develop and deliver programs that can address gaps and meet issues within the resources sector. That includes professional development, compliance, skills and training strategy and advice, capability building for suppliers, SME particularly, and identifying funding sources for support of workforce development, including assisting businesses to write and develop applications for supporting funding arrangements. So, what's happening in South Australia at the moment? The jobs figure in South Australia has gone up quite markedly from a year ago. This is the ABS data reported figure, which says in November 9,500 people were employed in mining. I just might touch on mining as a sector is inclusive of oil and gas, but it doesn't necessarily include members of businesses in the supply chain. It is about mining occupations though, and our research indicates that there are up to 15,000 other people employed in the met supply chain in South Australia. So combined, mining is an important industry in South Australia, employing around 25,000 people. But particularly important is that it's a high-tech and high-skills industry. Many occupations require trades and or professional qualifications, and it is a large driver of those occupations and professions in the workforce. So while we are considering METS as part of the industry, it does not necessarily get considered in the job advertisements that we're using for our data, as the industry is self-selected by the advertiser company. Usually that may be resources or mining and resources, and therefore METS is not considered. But we are taking a holistic view as to what those resources jobs may well end up coming from. Thank you. So what is the hiring intentions report today? We want to give everybody a quick update on a quarterly basis of what is actually happening in terms of hiring intentions. We count and record jobs that are advertised by occupations and do that on a daily basis over the course of the year and note what is happening. That is a leading indicator of vacancies and vacancy analysis, which allows us to be a leading indicator of employment in South Australia. So we collect it through online information, and it is eliminated duplication to the extent that is possible, recognising that subsector, job level and occupations are recorded by the advertiser. So I'd like to now hand over to Jody, who's going to talk about the quarterly job advertisements in the last quarter of 2017.
Thank you, Phil. So the data that we have at the moment in the graph that you're looking at reflects the last 4.5 years, and we can see that we've come out quite strongly from the downturn in 2015 with 660 jobs advertised in the second quarter of this financial year. So it looks like we're stabilising at those higher levels of employment. So the actual number of jobs compared to the same time last year is almost double, with 328, or more than double, 328 jobs advertised at the same time last year, and significantly higher than in 2012 and 13, before the downturn impacted the sector. So it's pleasing to see that growth is not only continuing but increasing in the sector. When we look at the indexed vacancies, this graph represents an index against the 3-year average from 2013 to 2015 as a benchmark. We can see that from January 2016 to December 2017 there's been a strong and marked increase. The number of advertisements has been consistently higher, and by December 2017 we've seen an increase of 284%. Phil has some insights into the market influences affecting this growth.
Thanks, Jody. Well, we used to publish a trend line on this graph, but it's not really necessary anymore because the graph describes the trend quite clearly. Over the last few years, we've had continued and sustained growth in the number of jobs being advertised, and this aligns also with the ABS data showing the number of people who've been employed in South Australia. In 2017, November 2017 data, that 9,500 was up 43% from the previous year, which is a significant increase, but off a relatively small base for South Australia. The South Australian figures are consistent with the national figures, where we have seen that commodity price increases across the board have led to further engagement of people in jobs and employment in most of the jurisdictions around Australia. South Australia has some variations associated with particular mines and projects because we have a growing industry coming out of a relatively small base, and we'll touch more on that later.
Thank you, Phil. This slide allows us to get a better insight into where the jobs are located within the regions of South Australia. We classify the data in 2 sweeps. The first sweep is a listing, which basically just copies the ad from the source into a table, and we're able to allocate them to regions. So this is very big picture data that we're looking at now. So we can see in quarter 2 the vacancies are predominantly in Adelaide and the Cooper Pedy and Outback regions, which is what we would expect because that's where the majority of the mining operations are located, and Adelaide is the place where the business head offices tend to be located, and a lot of the support services are supplied from Adelaide. The vacancy highlight, the second graph, the Adelaide and Cooper Pedy vacancy breakdown highlights the distribution of the occupations in the region. So in the green are the Cooper Pedy vacancies and Outback region, and in the blue are the Adelaide vacancies. As expected, the engineering business services opportunity are concentrated in the metropolitan areas. But it's interesting that oil and gas, geoscience and mechanical metal occupations are also highly represented in the metro region, although we do understand that these jobs will be undertaken in regional SA or further afield but sourced from Adelaide. We are seeing jobs for South Australians where the work is actually located interstate, particularly in the last quarter. The occupational level breakdown is in the second sweep of the data. We take the original listing and allocate each individual job mentioned in the ads to the ANSCO code occupation description. So this is a deeper drill down, and the numbers may vary slightly from the first set of data that we're looking for. So if there's a discrepancy there, that's why that occurs. So what we can see is basically some consistency across the occupational levels. Most noticeable, there's an increase in trades vacancies, and we can attribute that to one vacancy that was actually for 50 laggers in December. So that accounts for that spike that we can see in the trade occupations. And we are seeing a continuing increase in operator and professional opportunities from the last quarter, which isn't actually shown in this graph, but when we did a comparison, there is a small amount of growth there. Overall, we're seeing 53% trades and operators, which is a slight increase from the last quarter. We're seeing 31% of professional occupations, which has stayed the same for the quarter, and a 7% supervisory management positions, which is a slight decrease from the last quarter.
Jodie, I just would say here that we have also had anecdotal feedback with regard to trade qualifications that tell us that there are shortages that are starting to appear in the trades, and particularly around some occupations that we've noted before, drilling, diesel mechanics, electrical, are seeming to have more shortages, and it seems that the supply side of those, with a 4-year lead time to complete an apprentice, is important at the moment if people are not going to be faced with gaps in their workforce.
Mm-hmm. And I think the next slide helps to demonstrate that, the demand in those areas. So this is based on a subsector breakdown. There's 4 occupations represented here: the engineering breakdown, the mechanical, metal and maintenance breakdown, and the drilling and blasting breakdown. So you'll see them if you're going in a clockwise circle, starting at engineering. These are based on the raw data and actually looking at the occupation titles as they've been listed and picking out the jobs rather than the second sweep of data. So we've had 100 positions for engineers, and of those 15% were for project engineers, and 14% were for mining engineers, and 11% were for electrical engineers, keeping in mind that often a vacancy for a project engineer will actually also require a mining engineer, but we go by the actual occupation title as it's listed in the vacancy. There were 134 vacancies in the mechanical, metal and maintenance space. Of those, 35% were for diesel fitters and diesel mechanics, and 20% were for fabrication, welders, boiler makers, those kind of trade occupations. There were 34 drilling and blasting vacancies listed, and often these vacancies are for multiple positions. So again, we're just going from the raw data, the actual number of ads, not the number of positions. 63% of those 34 vacancies were for drillers, and 27% shop fires, keeping in mind the drillers in these instances are largely underground production drillers and some exploration drillers. The trade indicator there is taken from the vacancy listing against ANSCO codes, which is a little bit more of a drill down on the raw data. So where more than one position is listed in each advertisement, it's accounted for in this trade breakdown. So overall, there are 113 trade positions listed, where there was a number against it. The diesel mechanics and fitters made up 47% of those, and other engineering trades made up 14%. And auto electricians made up 10%. So we can see there's going to be a really big draw for diesel mechanics and fitters. Project and mining engineers are very much in high demand, and I think that's something that's really important for us to be aware of moving forward. Really important for companies who are doing their workforce planning. There's a lot of growth indicators coming through for 2018, and very important for companies to be aware of where these high demand areas are, because it will impact on their planning moving forward and the strategies that they may need to put in place.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about where this demand is originating from and how it's being created. I think that if you've been in South Australia, most people would have actually had heard of the GFG Alliance, which has taken over the Arium projects in Whyalla, which includes the steelworks and the mines that are associated with that steelworks. They have also recently announced 2 new approvals, mining lease approvals, for extensions of those current operating mines. In line with that, we would expect continued growth from GFG at the steelworks as they move from their strategic review phase into more implementation phase. BHP Billiton at Olympic Dam, of course, is the largest single operating mine and certainly underground mine in the country, but they're certainly the largest operating mine in South Australia, and they have been growing their workforce as they expand into the southern region. A lot of that workforce is now sourced from areas outside of the immediate area of Roxby Downs. They source it from Adelaide and Port Augusta and the Upper Spencer Gulf on the basis of the availability of supplies. And of course, those contractors who are working for them may well bring people into South Australia on a FIFO basis. CU River Mining has been working through development of their projects and are increasing both the number of people and the outputs associated with their mine. And Oz Minerals at Carrapateena has been developing their second decline and further activities around the camp. The camp is now being created and developed at Carrapateena, which is an important step in the project, and Pybar is the major contractor who's associated with the work that's being done in the mine for Oz Minerals. Those projects are all generating significant increase in the number of advertisements throughout South Australia. So looking ahead to the rest of the year, it's interesting to note that the number of business models, business feasibility studies that have been completed and JORP, resources defined, is at 20. 6 feasibility studies are being progressed at the moment, defined, bankable and definitive feasibility studies. 4 mining leases granted and 9 PEPAs approved. There are a number of PEPAs that are in submission at the moment and are expecting responses in the immediate, in the period before the end of February. Currently, the number of operating mines as defined by the Department of State Development and those that are current in operations is 12 in South Australia. Of course, this doesn't include the oil and gas projects or other projects that are working around that. Is simply the mining project. So South Australia's growth in the industry is continuing apace, and we would expect to see a number of other projects, including renewable projects such as the solar store project in Whyalla, in Port Augusta, and the solar project in Whyalla coming online during this year. As a result of that, we're looking at what might happen in the future in terms of what skills are going to be needed. We can change slides. And the occupations in demand, of course, will be driven by the types of projects that are going to be brought to online this year, and we'd expect to see more renewable projects coming on, or those projects that are related renewable. For example, the Archer exploration projects, which is associated with graphite production, as is the Lincoln Minerals graphite project on the Eyre Peninsula, which are associated to some extent with lithium batteries and car production. So it's an important new phase of growth in South Australia as those graphite and cobalt projects come online. Some other projects are related to gold and silver, such as the Havilah project in the northeast of the state and the Paris project are both coming on, or expect to be moving through development approval phase this year. we just really wanted to touch on these areas about what we would be looking to continue to research in the year ahead. Diversity, of course, is a significant issue in the mining industry as companies try to broaden the scope of their workforce by engaging with other groups, including women and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in the diversity framework. And that will be an area that we're going to look into a little bit more this year. We do know that the number of women employed in the industry has fallen as we went through the rephasing of mining from a boom to a more productive oriented phase, and we need to see if there are means that can be addressed as far as that is concerned. And innovation, of course. We'd like to think about how innovation is coming into the industry and what are the occupations and employment associated with that innovation, which will include remote and autonomous operations, remote operating centres, and other processes that are now being introduced into the mining industry quite quickly. Thank you. What we'll do now is just talk briefly about what we're doing as far as the supply chain is concerned. And the Resources Ready program is a program that we have been running in South Australia over a number of years to help businesses understand what they need to do to be more productive, more competitive as supply chain members of the resources industry. We are running a program on the Eyre Peninsula based out of Whyalla, which is starting on the 21st of February, where 6 workshops will be conducted with mentoring in between leading businesses down that pathway of more competitiveness within the industry. So if you have interest in this program, we welcome you getting in touch, and you can see the Resources Ready at RESA email at the bottom of that, or simply go to the RESA website or Google Resources Ready.
I'd also like to add there will be an information webinar for the Resources Ready program at 1:30 this afternoon, and you can access that from the RESA website. Just look for the programs and your capability programs, and you'll find Resources Ready links in there.
Thanks, Jodie. So now we just really want to touch on some questions and see if there are some questions that you would like to address. I'd also welcome any responses after the webinar if you wanted to get in touch and ask questions, or if there are areas of the workforce that you would like us to explore more because it's going to have an impact on your business, please let us know and we'll look into how we might be doing. Also, the links associated with the webinar will be forwarded to those people who have registered for the program, and the webinar will be available as a video after this time. So there are no questions. We'd like to thank you very much for attending today. Please go to the website and have a look at the information that's available, and we'd like to see you again in the next quarter as we do this quick update on hiring intentions in South Australia. Thanks and bye.
Thank you.